So thanks so much for joining us. My name is Harley Finkelstein. I'm CPO at Shopify. I'm here with the man behind Frank and Oak, as well as Holstee, Fabian, and Ethan. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the future of retail. And the idea is for this talk, we'll kind of give you a bit of an overview of the way we see the future of retail. And we were just discussing just before backstage, ironically, the future of retail, in terms from the consumer side, is actually a lot more. There's a lot more women involved in the future of retail than men, and it's ironic that there's three dudes on stage here. But nonetheless, so we'll tell you a little bit about kind of our overview of what we see as the future of retail, and then I'm going to sort of ask these guys a bit of questions on how they run their own retail businesses. In both cases, in both Holstee's case and Frank and Oak's case, they've taken a business model that is fairly traditional and has been around for a very, very long time. And they've sort of added some really interesting technology to revolutionize the way that business model was traditionally done. And they'll explain to you a little bit about what they do. But to begin with, I want to give you an initial premise for this talk. 15 years ago, if you want to sell a product, okay, let's say you built a bracelet, and you want to sell that bracelet and put it in the hands of consumers, you had to do a couple things. You had to go ahead and you had to get a lease, right, in an actual retail storefront, a brick and mortar storefront. You had to get inventory. You had to do leasehold improvements. You had to hire staff. You had to figure out payroll. And you were only open, 9 to 5, 6 days a week, and you were only selling to a particular geography. The difference is today, if I actually want to sell a product and get it into the hands of consumers, I can actually go direct to consumer on my own. And the major change that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years has been distribution. I couldn't get my products into people's hands unless I had stores in different cities. And the only people that had stores in different cities were big companies with very, very large capital and a lot of money behind them. But the internet actually provides that distribution, meaning I can now get my products into anyone's hands. That's premise one. So distribution has changed. Premise two is the fact that if you look at the different pillars of retail, what you need to actually start a retail business, so fundraising, prototypes or samples, distribution, fulfillment, the ability to accept credit cards, every single one of those pillars has been democratized. Raising money is now made easier through crowdfunding. Prototyping is now made easier through 3D printing. The actual retail experience is made easier by companies like Shopify. You can accept payments and be up and running in 15 minutes. Even fulfillment today is much easier, much less expensive. And so if you sort of take Moore's law, that everything technology-related gets easier, cheaper, and more accessible every 8 or 9 years or so, you can actually apply Moore's law to the entire retail model. The entire model, everything you need, is now made easier and less expensive. And so that's created huge opportunities for companies like Holstee and Frank and Oak. So those are the two initial assumptions, or the two initial thoughts that I want to put out there. That said, Fabian, if you can start, maybe give the crowd a bit of a 2-minute spiel on what you guys do over at Holstee.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fabian Pfortmüller. I'm originally from Switzerland. I've been an entrepreneur for pretty much since high school, and together with a few friends, I'm building Holstee at the moment for about 3 years. And what Harley said before is totally true. It's like, it's a very old idea that's done in a new way. What we do is we make sustainably produced goods, and we sell them. That's it. The difference in our case is just that we started out making sustainably produced apparel, and we sold them through Shopify. And being able to start online allowed us to, we were just 3 guys who had no idea what we were doing, honestly, and we started making t-shirts. And the first thing what we did is we realized that we wanted to build a brand based on values. We believe that the big brands of the next century, the Virgin or the Sonys or the big brands of this century, going to be defined by genuine values. And so the first thing we did is we wrote a manifesto called the Holstee Manifesto, where we defined what do we really want to achieve with doing this. And as it turns out, this became kind of our strongest identifier and our strongest part of marketing. So by now we estimate over about 200 million views online of our manifesto. And it also turned out to become kind of our first best-selling product in the form of that manifesto. We just launched most recently, our most recent vertical is Holstee Print, where we make sustainably produced letterpress goods, so cards, posters, where we try to bring inspiration and meaning to homes and offices. So if you're looking for inspirational messaging and beautiful art for your home and office, Holstee is your place.
Cool, that's awesome. So that's a little bit of Holstee. Ethan, you want to talk a bit about Frank and Oak, because what you guys have done is sort of taken, particularly for me and for most men who have trouble buying clothing and have trouble shopping and going into a brick and mortar store to begin with, you've kind of flipped that whole model on its head. Why don't you tell us a little bit what Frank and Oak does?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Ethan. I'm the CEO of Frank and Oak. Basically, what Frank and Oak is about is sort of solving, style for men. We're sort of like an advisor to guys.
You actually look better than we do, so whatever you're doing actually makes sense. It's working.
It is part of my daily job to help other guys. And so we start with a very simple premise, which is that guys don't really enjoy the actual act of shopping, but actually like to look good, right? So like everyone wants to look good. Everyone goes on dates. Everyone wants to dress in a confident manner for work. But how do I get that product to the guy in a way that's sort of frictionless, that's also fun, that's enjoyable, that ultimately will motivate guys to shop more and to enjoy the clothes that they're wearing more. And that's how we got started. And I would say, to sort of segue into what Harley was saying today, what we're sort of looking at now, I wouldn't say it's different than what we started with, but what we're trying to figure out is more, if you look at the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, massive brands were created. Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein type businesses, they're still generating tremendous value today, actually. In the 2000s, right, we saw the rise of vertical integration, and we saw a lot of businesses like Zara, Uniqlo, H&M's blow up, right? All over $10 billion in sales, people buying the product everywhere around the world. My question, and I guess I don't have the answer, and this is a question to the crowd here, and even to Harley, is how do you create the next wave of $10 billion retail companies? And I just know that it's not through tactics like subscription or flash sales or things like that. It's all about making the best product, getting into the user in a way that there's an engagement and that's frictionless. So that's the big question I think that everyone has, and I think that's what we should focus on.
So I'm going to challenge you on that. So most of you know that when you can get a subscription to Frank and Oak, which actually every month sends you clothing that is specifically tailored for you. It's made for you. It fits you. It's based on certain style preferences that you've indicated. That seems to be a pretty big part of Frank and Oak's success is the subscription side, but you're actually saying that that's actually not what it's all about. That's simply part of the process, or that's part of the business model.
Yeah, exactly. I really think that subscription or any kind of membership is not the product itself. It's a way to get at a product that's efficient and that has some benefits for both the user as well as the company. I think that a lot of the errors we've seen lately, especially in e-commerce, are attributed to the fact that people focus on the actual device, the marketing stunt or the actual how we're gonna get the clients to buy, and not on the actual product. And the product is not just the shirt or the t-shirt you're buying. It's customer service. It's knowing your customer. It's making actually the best product. One thing that was interesting when last time when we were raising our Series A and I was talking to some VCs, they were saying, well, ultimately all e-commerce businesses are marketing companies, right? Because you'll never beat Gap, you'll never beat H&M or whoever in making products. Well, I believe that's not true. It's gonna take some time, but I think that technology also enables manufacturing, enables design, making stuff that's relevant to your customer, speeding process, cutting down costs. All that is very important. It's not flashy, you don't see it, but that's sort of the slower change that's gonna happen on the market.
That's so this is interesting. So both you guys have sort of created these incredible brands, and one thing you guys both have in common is you guys are actually creators or curators, and I actually think the future of retail belongs to creators and curators, not big box, not Amazon, actually. I think what's going to end up happening is that if you want to buy something with a UPC code on it, so a staple, Tide detergent, Dove soap, a particular book, I'm probably going to use Amazon because the economies of scale that they have are unmatched by anybody else, and I can get it cheaper, more effectively. But in terms of buying a pair of jeans, or buying a shirt, or buying a really cool notebook, I actually want to buy from you guys. And so in some ways, I actually think the future of retail is going to be more distributed in terms of more small businesses, more entrepreneurs, not big box. And so that's where I see you guys doing well. So Fabian, I want to ask you something. Shopify has 60,000 actively selling stores. You are probably my favorite store, one of my favorite stores. I can say
you have
that
to
here.
say this now.
Don't tweet that. You're definitely one of my favorite stores, but you're also one of the most successful stores on Shopify's platform. And we have, Gatorade, Wikipedia, and Google selling, and I think in some ways you destroy those guys. You started your introduction by talking about the Holstee Manifesto. I've always viewed what you guys did with the Holstee Manifesto as a bit of a Trojan horse. You put out this incredible manifesto that basically says, if you hate your job, quit. If you don't like the people you're surrounding yourself with, find better people. If you're passionate about something, go and do it. And you talk about the manifesto as being your first product or your first successful product, but in some ways, it helped create Holstee as a whole. Talk about that experience a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a big question, but I'll try to keep myself short because it's a nice sunny afternoon here. We think that, Harley, you said it totally right. I think for us, we definitely believe that there's going to be the Amazon. If you know exactly what you want and it's a product with a UPC code on, you will get it on Amazon. But if you want something with a story, something that you want to have a personal relationship with, something you want to love, a product that you're going to like, you're probably going to go somewhere else. Yeah. And we believe this all comes down to values, that you need to have a certain connection to a company and you have to think of more than of a company as in like, okay, this is a utility, I go there and buy this and I get this. There has to be more about it. And as you said, it's about customer service, it's about, there's a whole experience around this. And for us, we said, the best thing we can do is we can clearly define what values we stand for. Because we feel that there's a lot of people out there who actually don't believe anymore in the values that the big companies, the big brands put out there. Who believes in the values of Gap? Who believes in the values of, like the Walmarts out there? Yeah, right. There's actually a lot of those companies do really good work, but a lot of if we talk about the consumers as a whole, they don't trust them as much anymore, I dare say. And we believe this is a huge opportunity. And we believe this opportunity for us is to kind of clearly define what we stand for. And I'll tell you how this goes. So yes, we have this manifesto, and we wrote about what we believe in and kind of what we think is kind of powerful for us.
It's like a mission statement,
right? It's like a mission statement, right. Correct. But it goes through our whole company. So for example, yes, we sell things, but we're also about we call it mindful consumption. If you go through our checkout process, in our checkout process, it asks you, do you really need this product?
Which is the opposite of every other company, right?
Exactly. It's the opposite of because we don't want people to just buy shit. We want people to buy things if they really need them, and we want them to have it for a very long time. First thing. Second thing, everything we design is fully transparent. We just soft launched our new website today, so go and check it out. It just launched today, and
Holstee.com, by the way.
Holstee.com. On every product, you see a source map. You see exactly where it comes from, where the factory is, where it's being distributed, and how many kind of kilometers it's going to take to ship to your place. We're being fully transparent in every single part in it, and we believe this is all going to kind of help us. We started online because this was the most flexible way to go, but we have very big dreams and plans. We want to be kind of a very, very big brand in the future, and we think what it all comes down to in the end is kind of back to that mission statement, back to those values, because people will ask us, what kind of company do I want to buy from? Do I want to buy from this company that makes shirts, or do I want to buy something from this company that sells shirts but is also doing a lot of good in the world and kind of stands for values that I identify myself with?
And they'll pay a premium for that also, right?
Exactly.
Which is really cool. So you alluded to something that I know the crowd wants to hear about, which is that the first question I get because of Shopify is, does the future of retail look like it's exclusively online? I get that question probably once a day, whether it's media or partners or just people interested. And ironically, I actually don't think the future of retail is online. I actually think the future of retail is about consumer choice, right? I think the future of retail is consumers wanting to buy a product in store, play with the product but have it shipped to them, right? So they don't take it home with them, or buy online and pick up in store, or some hybrid version of that. Both of you guys have sort of started as online. I'm curious how you're sort of thinking about that hybrid between online and offline, because we're seeing pop-up shops happening. We're seeing Best Buy crying about that no one's buying anything in store. They're actually using their stores as a showroom. I'm curious how you guys are sort of looking at that hybrid model.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you think about these kind of decisions, you have to sort of realize, what are you in business for? And for us, it's to create an engagement and a connection with our buyers. So I don't think that we are definitely like not just focused online. I think that there's opportunities everywhere. And ultimately, it's about creating more sort of contact points with your customers. And once you're able to decouple the actual inventory to the actual buying experience, whether it's on tablets, whether it's in the pop-up store, or whether it's in store, but not be able to have the inventory there, like then it becomes very, very interesting, right? Agreed. It means that you're not limited by square footage. You're not limited by the actual even physical space. And you can actually create in-store experiences that are not necessarily even about buying, but about living the brand or living the values of the brand, and then getting people to buy elsewhere, or they could also buy in the store. Yeah. It just opens you up to like so many different things. And I guess the last point on that, I actually believe that the companies that started in e-commerce have a better chance of succeeding in this sort of like omni-channel world, because you start with a data-centric inventory management. You have the profiles of your users. So when you start opening, whether it's stores or pop-up stores, you have all that information, and you will continue collecting all that information, whether they come in stores, whether they come directly online.
Yeah. It's ironic that 3 internet entrepreneurs are sitting on stage talking about the future of retail also includes brick and mortar. I want to hear what you think, Fabian.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I can only kind of say maybe in slightly different words and from my own perspective what you already said. I think it's so spot on that we think about every single customer is a relationship, and the more relationships we can build, the better. And offline is an amazing place to build relationships. It's an amazing place to create a unique experience for the customer. And so we're definitely very, very, very interested in doing that. On the one hand, for us personally, for example, is that retail stores saw us online. They saw our online campaigns, they saw our YouTube videos and whatnot, and they started contacting us. That's great. That used to be called trade shows. So we're now in places like Whole Foods, Nordstrom, paper stores, places like that. Well, a lot of that came actually from them finding us online. And the second thing is we're definitely thinking into things like, we're doing things like pop-up shops, and where if you actually sell the product in there, it's not even that important. It's more important that you get to meet customers, build relationships, collect data, have people sign up, etc. That's kind of almost more important than do you have inventory there and can you sell it right away?
It's funny. So a quick anecdote. So I walk to work from my house in Ottawa to the Shopify's office in Ottawa, and every day I walk by this beautiful storefront. If you know Ottawa, it's on Sussex, corner of George, probably the nicest area in Ottawa. And there's this beautiful glass storefront that's been sitting empty for 3 or 4 months. And I got sick of walking by and seeing this beautiful storefront not being used. And so I figured out who the owner of the building was, and I asked him if I could rent the storefront for 2 days. And after dealing with the city and some stupid bylaws, we were able to rent the store for 2 days. And we put 8 retailers that exclusively sell online in this offline brick and mortar location. We called it Popify, right? Popify by Shopify. Not a brilliant name, but we'll work on that. What happened in that 2-day period is 1,500 people came through the store. The retailers that were positioned in this store did about $15,000 or $16,000 worth of sales, which is pretty good for any store. But what was more interesting was the fact that the day after Popify, they all had their largest online sale day of the last year. What happened was companies like hammockuniverse.com, which we put there, which sells these beautiful hammocks, people actually want to sit in the hammock before they actually purchase the hammock. And so giving them the opportunity to demo the products was exactly what they wanted, which I thought was really cool. And so I think that, I think it's great. I think that 10 years ago, going back to that 10-year that mark 10 years ago, it was all about what retailers wanted. The retailer told you when they were open, where they were open, what to buy, where to wait in line, how to pay for products. The fact that consumers can now say to Best Buy, I actually don't want to buy something in your store. I want to play with the camera. I want to feel the tactility of it and the weight of it, but I want to buy it on my couch. I don't want to walk around with a clunky camera. I think that's the coolest part. Are you guys hearing from your consumers that they want things certain ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now there's a huge shift, right, in a lot of e-commerce, which is like go offline. I think that I still feel as though we have to be careful. Like, it's really, you have to see when it's appropriate, you know, because it is extremely expensive to go offline. It's extremely time consuming, and it's not efficient, actually. That's the reason why Best Buy is on, because it's actually not efficient. So any e-commerce that comes to me and says, we're going to be building 20, 30 stores, and we're going to make sales. If you open a store, of course you make sales, because you just got exposure. You just paid like all this money. So
and you have foot traffic, right? You're gonna
of course you get foot traffic, so it's obvious. Now, how do you do it in a different and efficient manner? I don't think anyone has the answer, and I think that's what's interesting. And my last point on that is that I find that, like, you know, sort of like, I guess, like internet fashion entrepreneurs like us, like, I often get the question, are you a fashion company or are you a tech company?
Which is a really cool question, right?
Well, as if it matters, right? Like, I think that you know, what do we sell? Ultimately, we actually sell fashion. So I guess we're a fashion company. But the philosophy behind the company is very data and products driven.
It's much bigger than just the actual
exactly. So
wear that you
that's sort of like my answer to it. And I find that in the fashion tech world right now, there's a lot of people that comes from fashion, a lot of people that come from tech. But it doesn't matter where you come from. You need to be able to see both sides. You need to have the creative and emotional and the value-based, you know, marketing or engagement towards a brand, but also a strong understanding of data. It's the right balance, and I think it's hard to find.
Cool. So, you know, one thing I'd also say is that in terms of identifying customers and getting in touch, you know, we often hear from our stores, okay, we set up a store on Shopify, we got these great products, we're not making any sales. What's the problem? And one of the things that I find so ironic, or one of the biggest problems or gaps in that understanding, in that building process, is if you build a brick and mortar store in downtown Montreal, you will get organic foot traffic. If you build a store online, people will not necessarily organically come. You may have some SEO juice, and you may have some people that may stumble on your site, but you actually have to bring people in, which is where I think the brand is so compelling and so interesting. But even one step further than that, if you have a blog, we have a store, for example. It's called, you actually may know it, Of a Kind. It's out of New York, really amazing fashion store out of New York. They have a blog, and the blog doesn't talk about their products. It's just a phenomenal fashion blog. And so often when they talk to us, the first thing we ask is, why don't you talk about your products on your blog? And basically they say, because we don't want to be douchebags. We don't want to promote, we want to have the best fashion blog out there, and we want to make it vendor agnostic. And because of that, because they've become the evangelists of their little community, they've become the leader of their retailer. What do you think about that, Fabian?
I think it's so spot on, and I just the friendly technician over there told me I should not try to swallow my microphone, so I will try not to. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so spot on because, you know, sorry, what is the question now?
So just going back to the blog.
Oh yeah, to the blog. Sorry, yeah, exactly. No, sorry, there you go. That's my mind. 100% correct. It's like we do the same thing. We run a blog called Refresh.is. It's not called Holstee. It's not. It's even separate branded. It says kind of like, you know,
product of Holstee or
yeah,
something.
Exactly. Yeah. Thoughts on sustainability, travel, and kind of live your dream by Holstee. But it's a separate blog. It's really all about kind of trying to become a thought leader in the space. When we started out with Holstee about 3.5 years ago, and we tried to raise money for Holstee, people told us it's not possible to build a brand online. If you really want to be a product, you have to be an offline thing. You're not going to be a brand. And I think the last 3 years have proven that to be wrong. You can be an actual brand that just lives online, and that goes through things such as, you know, we do a lot of YouTube campaigns. We do big videos. We're very, very proactive with sharing content, with creating content. And also, I think in the end of the day, it's also going to go through customer service. Just being extremely proactive, being extremely friendly with customer service. I think that helps kind of creating an actual brand, and which, as we talked about before, then allows you to go then into other channels from into offline retail, etc.
Right. So I started off the conversation by talking about these different pillars of retail. So you need to actually raise money, or you need to do a prototype, you need to sell it, you need to fulfill it, you need to do customer service. Then I talked about the fact that in each place, technology has actually democratized that. So again, crowdfunding, or 3D printing, or online e-commerce platforms, or even on the fulfillment side. Now I'm sort of comparing 10 years ago to today. What about the last 2 or 3 years? What have been the biggest changes for you guys in the last 2 or 3 years, or even the last 12 months that you think is sort of crazy and revolutionary in terms of retail?
Well, I think a lot of stuff has happened. I definitely think that, it's something that you would expect us to talk about, but it's true that mobile is really changing the way people are buying stuff. And the data shows it, the experience is there. And also mobile is a big piece into creating that sort of omni-channel retail, because you can have your mobile in a store, you can have your mobile at home. So I think that's a big part, and we can really see that it's taking off. People are actually converting to sales. There's more interesting content being created. There's multiple platforms. So I definitely think that if you don't understand or are trying to understand mobile, I think that you're behind for sure. And for sure what Fabian is saying also, I've realized that people are much more about point of views nowadays than they used to be. It used to be very efficiency-based. Everything was about getting fastest shipping, getting free shipping, getting stuff fast. But ultimately, that's only good for maybe one purchase, for that one thing that you didn't even really want it.
You're not going to build loyalty like that.
It's not sustainable. So actually, the engagement, and it's hard because it's hard to measure it. But that stuff becomes more and more important.
I don't have much to add. Two things maybe. We actually, you mentioned kind of fast shipping. We definitely feel that on our side that people just get used to Amazon. People expect things to be shipped within 1 or 2 days. And that has both opportunities and challenges for a startup like ours. For example, we do fulfillment out of 2 fulfillment centers worldwide. One in Michigan, and now we just opened up one in the UK, so we can ship Europe much faster. So I think that is really interesting that now also kind of the global aspect becomes much more accessible for just using different fulfillment centers. And the second thing that has kind of come up for me recently is to see that Kickstarter has been around for a couple of years, but first Kickstarter projects were just ideas, products that came up that blew up a little bit on Kickstarter, then went away and were never seen again. And I think also something that you guys at Shopify have done really well is provide a platform for these guys that they've actually become brands. So quite a lot of things that started on Kickstarter, and I would say that's kind of like the baby phase of a product, has gone into kind of the middle school and the high school phase of the product, kind of then afterwards on e-commerce, and now to become like real big brands. And I'm really curious to see how that's going to develop further on, from like truly democratized small projects to until big brands like Dodo cases or things like that really started very organically.
So I think we have 5 minutes left, so I'll sort of break these down, start summarizing. But one thing I am thinking about is, so as it's becoming easier to build online retail, offline retail, as it's becoming easier to build businesses because of technology, because people are more savvy, and a lot of these tools have become, again, democratized, it means that everyone basically now build a business, right? So prior to that, the barrier to entry was, do you have money? Do you have connections? Do you have relationships? I think it's great that that's no longer the barrier to entry into starting a new business. But the fact that anyone can do it means that everyone will do it, right? And so I've thought for a while now, when I look at my favorite stores on Shopify, I look at, okay, what are these guys doing differently? And for the most part, it seems like the new competitive advantage isn't connections or finance, it's actually creativity, right? You guys have both taken something that is fairly traditional and flipped it on its head. What do you guys think about competition, sort of Me Too companies? Again, because anyone can do it, does everyone do it?
Yeah, I think you can open a store on Shopify in like 2 minutes nowadays.
Thanks,
so
man.
It's definitely pretty easy to do, and I think that you guys were a big part in sort of making that very democratic. And I think it's great because it means just that there's so much more product on the market, right? You can get stuff you could have never bought before. But I guess I'm not too concerned in the sense that it's easy to open a store and it's easy to make any product, but it's very hard, very, very hard actually to make a great product and have a great user experience. Like so hard that it's almost impossible, and you're always striving for that, and every single year you have to catch up. So, I think there's this whole thing of good to great, and it's easy to get that first like 80%. But the last 20%, there's not a lot of people, and they could be like $500 million businesses. They're not even there yet. So I think to beat that is very, very challenging. And the second point is the fact that there's all these like thousands and millions of little stores, but there's still such a small piece of the market,
right.
Like such a small piece of the market, like 3-4 people companies. So how do you take that and start really being democratic?
Right.
I think that's the next step.
I agree. We at Holstee think about it like, how do we become a destination? For us, kind of the key word there is, if you want to be in the online space, in the e-commerce space, you have to be a destination for product X. And I think it's very important, or for us, that's kind of the challenge we have to solve is like, I think Warby Parker is an amazing example, or Tetley. Warby Parker makes glasses, and like, for example, also sunglasses like these. They sell them online, much cheaper, and people know exactly, if I want glasses, I go to Warby Parker. And so they've kind of established that link very clearly, and I think a lot of shops still have challenges with like, being that
trying to be everything to everyone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And in Warby's case, what I love so much about there, I think the guy before us who were speaking here also mentioned them, is that is the paradigm for me, paradigm example of disintermediation. They decided that no longer can Luxottica sort of sell it or sort of build it, send it to an agent, to send it to a distributor, send it to a retailer to get it to the consumer's hands. They cut out everyone and went direct to consumer, and they built an entire brand around it.
Right. I 100% agree, and I think that it comes down to focus. I think if you want to be in the e-commerce space, something we've also realized sometimes more the painful way than the smart way is you just have to be hyper-focused. And I think there's a lot of, I would say with the millions of like shops there, I think there's a certain dilution happening,
yeah.
and there's a lack of focus sometimes, if I have a critical hat on, which is just going to be hard. Like, I think customers will find those shops, but unless they're very, very clear what they sell, the customers will not come back to that shop because there's too much choice. And there's always going to be, as Harley said at the beginning, there's going to be Amazon. And Amazon is always there. If you know exactly what you want and there's no clear destination, you just go to Amazon and buy it there. But if there's a vertical that you can really like, you identify it clearly, you go deep into from like production to fulfillment to everything, and you can communicate and build a brand around it, then I think the opportunity is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, like to this point, like the Amazon point, that's actually one of the reasons why we refuse completely to wholesale to anyone. Like we will never sell through any other retailer than through our own channels.
Direct to consumer exclusively.
Only for us, and I think it's different for different brands because different brands stand for different things. But in our case, it is a way to protect ourselves from this sort of like being overexposed or just being through all these channels that we don't control.
It also protects experience, right? You were able to tailor the exact experience that you want to deliver without any
And it's hard because sometimes we do get like demand, like we'll place like a $500,000 order, right? We'll come to you and we want to place a big order for next season, and we'll say no to that because once you start doing that, you start actually diluting the brand. You start diluting the experience. You start like changing like the perception of your product, and that's why for us, even if we want to go into like in-store experience, we'll always go vertical and open our own setup, our own experience. And I think that's part of protecting what your company stands for also.
Yeah. So I think we only have about a minute left, and I want to see if there's any questions in the crowd. Before we sort of take that, I just want to say, you guys have been doing this for like 2 or 3 years, right? I think 3 years you've been doing this. The fact that you've both been able to not only start and launch, but really scale to grow multi-million-dollar businesses. I'm really excited that the future of retail looks like you guys, and thanks so much for joining us, and just a round of applause for these guys. So we literally have this yellow light that's going to turn red in like a minute and a half, so let's do some questions. Yeah.
I love your idea of Shopify. Why don't you do something like that, but in every city where you kind of demo e-commerce businesses? Because that's the big thing for me. I see products online, I can't try it out, I'm done.
Right, I mean, I'll go one step further. What about... What's that? Oh, repeat the question. So he thinks I should do more Popifys all over in every city. Before I answer that question, let me say one more thing. The fact that you can walk around downtown Montreal, the old port, you will probably see 4 or 5 storefronts right now that are vacant. Now, they may be filled in the next couple of weeks, right? Maybe they're transitioning between tenants. But why not put someone in there right now? And so not only do I think it's a great idea just for these retailers that predominantly sell online, I think it's actually going to be extremely unique and disruptive to real estate as well, where you can put people in. To answer your question, that's something that we may be doing pretty soon.
You're saying Airbnb, but
I didn't say that. You said that, but that's a pretty good idea. Yeah.
Well, in Montreal, we have Breather,
Yeah, right.
and which is an amazing business, and they're all about renting out spaces that are unused, right? Because there's so many of those. So it is making physical space actually democratic. So that's very interesting.
Do you know that Cadillac Fairview doesn't give leases less than 6 months? Cadillac Fairview owns most of the malls in Canada. They don't give leases out that are less than 6 months. I had to go and get an exemption from City Hall in Ottawa and an exemption from Claridge to rent a retail space for 2 days that was sitting empty. It was empty. I gave them thousands of dollars and they said no to me initially. So there's a lot that has to happen, but I think we're gonna change things, and I think that this opens up opportunities beyond just technology into traditional businesses like real estate. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
How much emphasis do you put on content strategy when you're giving advice to your stores?
Like content?
Yeah, like how valuable is content strategy in that?
So the question is, how valuable is content strategy?
Yeah, content is everything. I mean, like that's how you shape the brand. But content is not just a blog post. Content is the product pictures you have in your e-commerce are content. The models that you choose, the way you write the copy and the product descriptions, all that to me is content. And beyond that, obviously videos and things like that, that's actually telling the story of what you stand for. So it's very, very important. And when you look at, especially when you move into mobile, it becomes even more important.
I mean, if you're selling Italian sausages online, you better have the best sausage blog out there. And don't talk about your sausages, just talk about the history of sausages, the different types of casings. Talk about things that are compelling. If you can become the leading blog for sausages in the world, your store will probably do pretty well.
I want to hear about your sausage.
That's a traditional VC, by the way, that just said that, which is hilarious and ironic.
I can also back this up with some numbers that we get a lot of traffic that has nothing to do with our product, but that comes from content. So that has to do, in our case, with sustainability, recycled products, some kind of like passion project, and our whole brand, for example, is if you go to our site, there's one thing called shop, but then there's like four other top menu navigation points that have nothing to do with shop. Like there's a My Life initiative where people talk about their experience with the product. There's one around like a fellowship where we give $1,000 a month to people to kind of live their dream for projects like that. That drives kind of a majority of the traffic.
There's a great Canadian, so Shopify runs a Build a Business competition every year, and the Canadian winner this year was a store called CanadianIcons.ca, which is based out of Aylmer, Quebec. They sell Canada Goose jackets. There's literally thousands of places in Canada buy Canada Goose jackets. Why did CanadianIcons.ca do so well? Because they actually created a museum. When you go to CanadianIcons.ca, you first read about the history of the parka. Then you read about how the parka developed. Then you read about the history of Canada Goose. And by the time you finish sort of this content ingestion and digestion, you're now compelled and excited to buy this jacket. Also, during snowstorms, they do 90-minute delivery anywhere in every major city in Canada. So you can, 90-minute delivery, they will deliver to you by hand. That is compelling. That is disruptive. Holt Renfrew cannot do that, and that's why they're going to beat out those guys. You're saying keep going. He's saying no.
I'm saying no.
Oh, you're saying no too? Yeah. Okay, that will take a yes. So, yeah. Sorry, oh, that's a wrap. I thought that meant continue. Keep going. Thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thanks.
Sorry. Keep talking, whatever. You're